Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please?
Like and subscribe.
Welcome to the Sit, Walk, Work podcast, a show about paying attention. My name is Dominic and I'm your host, and today is a guided meditation. And what you can expect is that the practice will open up with a brief recap, followed by the actual practice itself. If you find today's episode valuable, please share with your friends and family, and feel free to leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. The show will begin after the following chimes. Today's practice was centered and focused around this idea of formal and informal practice. So this would be considered formal. We're sitting down. You're making space and time for it. You are carving out a spot in your life for it. Informal practice was the kind of the metaphor I gave about my travel. Moments when stress occurs and things happen and we find ourselves anxious or frustrated or angry or sad or happy. These are all predicated on the sensations and the breath and the things that you're focusing on here in practice. And so that was kind of the backdrop in which we worked upon. And then we moved into initially breath awareness. I just wanted you to feel your breath kind of moving. Well, not initially. You were kind of more open. I kind of left you in an open space while I gave you that disclaimer around what we were doing in practice today. And then we moved to the breath and connected you to the awareness of your breath just naturally moving in and out. And then we focused a bit on kind of the locus of attention, like where do you kind of look at the world from, right? How do you see it? And I wanted to use that as a way to broaden your understanding of experience, right? And that gave space for the breath, that gave space for the sounds. And then it kind of gave you just the opportunity to sit with whatever might have been coming up in your mind today, if it was different than what I was offering up. And could we hold or give ourselves a little bit of compassion for this thing we call life? Is kind of the next part of the practice before putting us back to our breath, back to where we started. Throughout practice, you can expect a couple things. One, I'm going to give you some guidance and pointers to kind of direct your attention towards the experience for this moment. And then I'll give you space to kind of sit with that and see what comes up, what you notice, what you observe. Because that's really the essence of the practice, is that you're making time to observe what's happening with you. I think some of the things that I would ask when you're kind of taking yourself under observation is to do so softly. I think we can sometimes put a sense of needing things to be a certain way. And I'm going to ask you to consider for this practice to kind of watch how things are and notice when you find yourself wanting them to be differently. And so with that, check into your posture again. Make any additional adjustments you might need to be a little more comfortable. And if you haven't already, you can close your eyes. Take a breath in. Feel that breath go. And this kind of begins, right? The closing of the eyes kind of sends the signals like, okay, what are we doing here? We have a wide atmosphere of changing objects to work with during our practice. Sounds and breath, thoughts and sensations or feelings in our bodies. These are the raw elements or ingredients that kind of make up our practice, but they also make up our life. And so for the next minute or so, I want you to just notice what you brought into the practice and notice those raw sensations, the breath, the body, the mind, and see how they come together to kind of formulate what we know as a feeling or a feeling tone. I was out last week because I was traveling. And one of the things I noticed on my travels last week was just how much an experience like that can be a huge opportunity for you to notice all the ways in which your mind is kind of thrown in different directions, you know, from simply trying to get to the airport to getting on the plane to getting off the plane. There's these opportunities for all of the things to arise, nervousness or frustration or joy or relief. Like there's a whole sensory experience of simply traveling. So I think it's the same when we get in our cars as well. But I think it's important to understand like those informal moments are as much a part of your practice as what you're doing right now, because the same sensations and feelings and breath that you're tuning into right now show up in our everyday life. And so as we expand our practice over time, we start to take these concepts from this moment and into our everyday activities. And as you are kind of openly observing everything that's present, I want you to get a sense for where you're observing from. And what I mean by that is we call this your locus of attention. So this is where it feels like you see the world from. Oftentimes that is in our head, behind our eyes, looking out into the world. In this case, looking out into the openness, the darkness of your closed eyes. And it's from this place, this vantage point, that we're taking in our experience of what's happening, of the breath that's coming and going, of the way your body feels, of maybe the pace of your mind moving quickly as it works to settle into what you're asking of it. And as your attention is kind of focused here on where you're observing from, see if you can step back and take in more. Open your into the peripheral vision of your eyes. Notice what it feels like if you try to notice the space above you or behind you or below you and kind of feel the space of your experience. Even something that feels as solid is as where you're looking from is much broader and much wider, showing up in the space of your awareness or your conscious experience. And as you're resting in this space, begin to let your attention shift and notice how the breath is moving. And in this act of breath awareness, it is what it sounds like. It's to notice the breath moving in and out of you, to bring your attention to it. If you can, see if you can notice the moment your inhale breath starts, where in your body you feel that, how and when it begins. Follow it till its completion. Let it go and let the cycle repeat again. And at some point in the practice, if it hasn't potentially happened, the mind might get distracted. You might find that you're with your breath for a moment, and then the next, you're thinking about what's next or what was. And partially the reason for that is that experience comes to you. There's a lot that you don't have to do for these things to happen. In the same way, your next breath will find its way around, your next thought will pop into your mind. And in this way, we receive the changing elements of our experience. And it's our ability to notice that it's changed, allow it to move through, and in this case, return back to your breath. Breath is kind of our first line of defense and noticing when things are happening to us. The moments when we kind of hold it tense or taut, or we take a big breath in or a small breath out. In this way, it can always give us a frame of reference as to what's going on within us. But the breath isn't alone in the practice. It is one object you can observe. But because you have space in your awareness for all experience, you can begin to widen your attention further. And it's as if you allow the breath to kind of defocus and bring to the forefront with your attention any sounds you might be hearing in your environment. As you're kind of scanning for sound, notice the properties that are present. Sound that might be close or sound that might be far away. The absence of sound, is there truly no sound present? Notice the way that sound, like the breath, is another type of energy, that it moves and it changes, and that you do nothing to receive it. It just comes. But it's what happens next when we receive a sound, a breath, a thought, a sensation. Some ways we can add to it, putting a story on it about how we're practicing, what we want from practice in this moment, or this needs to be a certain way. If you find yourself captured in anything along those lines, much like your exhale breath, let that go. And while I can direct your attention to the prompts that I've given in practice, as we share this communal space of meditation, each individual experience is independent of that. And so, if throughout practice today, something different than what I've had you focused on has been arising, see if you can take this very curious and neutral attitude and investigate it. Watch it the way you've watched your breath and heard the sounds. Notice what else is happening in your experience and lend your attention to it. Sitting in practice is an opportunity for you to become aware of the most subtlest parts of yourself. So that when you're not in practice, you can sense where you might be going. You can become a little more intuitive before you find yourself down a path that isn't fitting or isn't where you want to be. And it's also so that you can invite in and allow for things that are nurturing that help you. So, independent of what's happened in your practice today, begin to shift your mind to thoughts of gratitude, support, well being, or even compassion, right? If something came up that felt a little sticky or challenging, what would it be like to offer some compassion towards that? To recognize and realize that all parts of our life get a say, and that by acknowledging them and seeing them, there is there is space there that can be created, even if they arise again. That it's okay that for you to give yourself the compassion you need in this moment. That is enough. Begin to allow your attention to find its way back to your breath. Even that is built with its own sense of gratitude, that connection between us and the world around us, that you breathe and the world breathes you, right? Like there's a relationship there. And then as you watch the next inhale show up, there can be deep gratitude for the fact that it did. And then the last couple minutes of practice, simply acknowledge or check back in with, I should say, that feeling tone. Noticing where you are versus where you started. You can begin to open and close the hands, maybe point, flex the toes. Start to give yourself a bit of movement as we begin to close and wind down practice. The eyes can flutter open. It is still bringing in information, it's just more of it or a wider space of it.
That's the beauty of it.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. I invite you to check out my Substack, where we are building a community of like-minded individuals to discuss all topics related to the idea of paying attention. I hope to see you there. But until then, with Metta, may you be well.